My name is Daniel Carter, and on June 14th, 2017, my life changed forever. I was never the type of person to think too much about death. I was a firefighter trained to run toward danger, not dwell on what might happen if things went wrong. I had always believed in God, but I never considered myself overly religious. I prayed when I needed to, I went to church on holidays, but I never truly understood what faith meant. Until the day I died. It all started like any other day. I kissed my wife, Sarah, goodbye before heading to the firehouse. My team and I had responded to a few routine calls, nothing too out of the ordinary. Then, in the late afternoon, we got an emergency call about a warehouse fire on the outskirts of town. When we arrived, the smoke was thick, billowing into the sky, and the flames had already consumed most of the structure. We knew there were still people trapped inside, and without hesitation, I rushed in with my partner, Jason, to do what we were trained to do: save lives. At first, everything felt like just another fire rescue. The heat was intense, but we had dealt with worse. We pushed forward, moving through the thick smoke, searching for survivors. We found a man and his young daughter huddled in a corner, their faces covered in soot, their eyes wide with fear. I scooped up the little girl while Jason helped the father, and we began making our way back. That's when everything went wrong. A loud crack echoed through the building, and before I could react, the floor beneath me gave way. I felt the sudden drop before my mind could even process what was happening. 1 second, I was holding that little girl in my arms, and the next, I was free falling into darkness. The impact was brutal. I hit the ground hard, and a sharp pain shot through my back and chest. I could hear the sound of collapsing debris all around me, but the worst part was the fire. Flames spread across the broken beams and rubble, trapping me beneath the wreckage. My gear was torn, my breathing was ragged, and the heat was unbearable. I knew I was in trouble. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. My arms were weak, and every breath felt like I was inhaling fire itself. Above me, I could hear Jason's muffled voice shouting my name, but the smoke was too thick for him to see me. I wanted to yell back, to let him know I was still alive, but the words never came. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, and suddenly, the pain started to fade. It was like my body was shutting down, surrendering to what was happening. A strange calmness settled over me, and in that moment, I knew I was dying. As the world around me faded, I became aware of something different. The fire, the smoke, the collapsing building. All of it seemed to slip away. It was as if I was no longer inside my body but watching everything from above. I could see Jason and the other firefighters frantically trying to reach me, but their voices were distant, like an echo in the background. Then, before I could even process what was happening, I felt something pull me away, almost like I was being lifted out of that chaos and into something entirely new. At first, everything around me was complete darkness. Not the kind that felt empty or frightening, but something vast, like a space without walls or limits. I didn't feel pain anymore, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. There was a deep stillness, a silence so profound that it felt like time itself had stopped. Then, out of the darkness, a light appeared. It was distant at first, just a small point on the horizon, but as I focused on it, it began to grow. It wasn't just light. It was warmth, love, and something far greater than anything I had ever known. The closer I got, the more I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Every fear, every regret, every burden I had carried through my life seemed to dissolve in the presence of that light. Then, as I moved forward, I realized I wasn't alone. There was a presence with me, something so powerful yet so gentle that it was impossible to describe. I couldn't see a physical form at first, but I knew, deep in my soul, that I was standing before something divine. And then, as if the light itself had shaped into a figure, I saw him. Jesus stood before me, radiating a love so intense that it brought me to my knees. His presence wasn't just something I saw, it was something I felt in every part of my being. He didn't speak with words, yet I understood everything he wanted me to know. It was as if he was pouring his wisdom, his love, directly into my soul. In that moment, I realized how small I was in the grand scheme of eternity, yet I had never felt more loved, more valued, more seen. But then, something unexpected happened. Instead of welcoming me home, Jesus looked at me with a sorrowful kindness and spoke. Not with his mouth, but with his presence. "You cannot stay." Those were the words that filled my soul, though they weren't spoken in any way I had ever heard before. They weren't harsh, but they carried a weight I couldn't ignore. I wanted to protest, to beg him to let me remain in this perfect peace. But before I could, he showed me something. My life, laid out before me like a story being told all at once. I saw everything, not just the big moments, but the small ones too. The times I had shown kindness, the times I had hurt others, even when I didn't mean to. Every action, every word, every choice had mattered more than I ever realized. And then, he showed me something even more painful, the moments where I had turned away from what truly mattered. I had always believed in God, but I had lived my life as if faith was something to call on only when I needed it. I thought praying every now and then was enough, but I saw now that prayer wasn't just words. It was how I lived. Jesus didn't judge me. He didn't condemn me. Instead, he let me feel what he felt. The deep sorrow for every missed opportunity to love, to forgive, to be the man I was created to be. And yet, even in that sorrow, there was still overwhelming love. It was as if he was showing me these things not to shame me, but to wake me up. He wanted me to understand that life wasn't about just existing, going through the motions, or waiting for heaven. It was about living in a way that reflected his love every single day. Then the vision changed. I saw my wife, Sarah, sitting in the hospital, her face buried in her hands as she prayed for me. I saw my son, Noah, too young to understand what was happening, asking when I was coming home. I saw my parents, my friends, my brothers at the firehouse, all of them carrying the weight of my absence. And in that moment, I knew I had to go back. The moment I realized I had to go back, I felt something shift around me. The warmth of the light, the overwhelming peace, it all began to fade. I wanted to hold on to it, to stay just a little longer, but Jesus' presence surrounded me with reassurance. "Your work isn't finished," the message pressed into my soul, not in words, but in a knowing so deep I couldn't deny it. Then, in an instant, I felt myself being pulled backward, like a force beyond my control was dragging me away from heaven and back into the world I had left behind. Suddenly, everything came rushing back at once. The sound of crackling fire, the weight of debris on my chest, the searing pain that tore through my body. I gasped for air, feeling my lungs burn as I choked on smoke. My eyes fluttered open to flashing lights, to the sight of my partner Jason hovering over me, shouting my name. The paramedics were there, lifting me onto a stretcher, their voices frantic, but all I could focus on was the fact that I was back. Somehow, against all odds, I was alive. The next few days in the hospital were a blur of pain, surgeries, and endless questions from doctors who couldn't quite understand how I had survived. They told me I had been trapped under the wreckage for over 6 minutes without oxygen. By all medical reasoning, I shouldn't have made it. But I knew the truth. I knew why I was still here. I had been given another chance, not just at life, but at truly living. And I wasn't going to waste it. Something inside me had changed. The man who went into that burning building wasn't the same man who came out. I could feel it in every part of me. The things I used to chase, career success, recognition, even the small daily frustrations, they didn't matter anymore. What mattered was love. What mattered was how I treated the people around me, how I lived my life in a way that reflected the presence of God. Not just in prayer, but in action. Recovery wasn't easy. My body was weak, my lungs scarred from the smoke, and the pain was constant. But the hardest part wasn't the physical healing, it was trying to explain what had happened to me. I told my wife, Sarah, about the light, about Jesus, about everything I had seen and felt. She listened with tears in her eyes, holding my hand as I struggled to put something so indescribable into words. When I told her that I had seen her praying for me, that I had felt her sorrow even from the other side, she broke down. "I begged God to bring you back," she whispered. "I didn't know if he would, Word spread quickly about my survival. My brothers at the firehouse came to visit, each one looking at me like I was some kind of miracle. "Man, you should be dead," Jason told me, shaking his head. "I don't know how you made it out of there." I wanted to tell him everything, to make him understand that it wasn't just luck, that God had sent me back for a reason. But when I tried, I could see the doubt in his eyes. Not everyone was ready to believe, and that was something I had to accept. I wasn't sent back to convince people. I was sent back to live differently, to love deeper, to be a walking testimony of God's grace. I started seeing life through a new lens. The little things that used to bother me, traffic, stress, meaningless arguments, none of it mattered anymore. Every moment, every breath, felt like a gift. I made sure to tell Sarah and Noah I loved them every single day. I reached out to people I had lost touch with. I forgave people I never thought I could forgive. Most importantly, I started praying in a way I never had before. Not just asking for things, not just when I was in trouble, but really talking to God, thanking Him, listening, surrendering my life to Him fully. And as I did, I realized something powerful. Prayer isn't just about speaking, it's about living. Every act of kindness, every moment of patience, every time I chose love over anger, that was a prayer in itself. That was what Jesus had shown me. As time went on, I felt a growing need to share my experience, not because I wanted attention, but because I knew there were people out there who needed to hear it. I started small, just conversations with friends, family, and the guys at the firehouse. Some listened with curiosity, others with skepticism. But there were always a few whose eyes filled with tears, as if my words were touching something deep inside them. That's when I knew this wasn't just about me. God had given me this experience for a reason, and I couldn't keep it to myself. Eventually, I was invited to speak at a local church. Standing in front of a room full of people, I felt nervous, not because I was afraid to tell my story, but because I wanted them to truly understand. I didn't just want to describe what had happened. I wanted them to feel what I had felt, to know that God's love is real, that He sees us, and that our lives have meaning beyond what we can comprehend. As I spoke, I could see the impact it was having. People nodded, some wiped away tears, and others sat in stunned silence. That's when I realized that this, sharing the truth of what I had experienced, was part of my purpose. But not everyone accepted my story. Some people dismissed it as a hallucination, a trick of the brain caused by trauma. Others told me it was impossible, that I must have imagined it. I won't lie, at first the doubt hurt. I wanted people to believe me, to understand the depth of what I had experienced. But then I remembered what Jesus had shown me. My job wasn't to convince anyone. It was to live in a way that reflected what I had learned. To show, not just tell. And so, that's what I've been doing ever since. I wake up every day with gratitude in my heart, knowing that I was given a second chance, not for my own sake, but so that I could share this message. Life is short. None of us know how much time we have, but what we do with it matters. It's not enough to just say we believe, to pray when it's convenient, or to call on God only when we're in trouble. Our entire lives should be a prayer. Every action, every choice, every word we speak should reflect the love we claim to believe in. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you for listening to my story. I don't know what brought you here today, but I don't believe in coincidences. Maybe you're struggling with faith, maybe you've been searching for answers, or maybe you just needed a reminder that God is real, that He sees you, and that He loves you more than you can imagine. If this story touched you in any way, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more stories of faith and transformation. And if you have a story of your own, drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Thank you for being here. Remember, every breath you take is a gift. Don't wait until it's too late to start living in a way that truly matters. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.